We're here for another episode of Cold Email Breakdown. And for anyone who's never seen this before, my name is George. I'm the founder of Email Chaser, which is a cold email sending platform. And I'm joined today with Josh. And Josh, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Hi, I'm Josh Michaels, the founder and CEO of 3 Red Boxes, a cold outreach and deliverability agency.
Cool. And in these episodes, we just talk about cold email and different topics that a lot of people face. And just before we started recording today, we were talking about some of the stuff that Josh is doing with some of his clients that related to automations. So do you want to go into that and maybe just share with everyone some common automations that a lot of your clients have been asking about?
Yeah, so one of the things you kind of have to decide when you're building outreach platforms and you're building multiple mailboxes on multiple domains is how do you want to check all these emails, right? I know Email Chaser and some of its competitors, they usually have some kind of master inbox that you can go into and check all the emails. For some reason, most of my clients don't ever want to actually use the platform that it's built for to do that. Not sure why. They could put some comments below the video and tell me why, but a lot of times they want to just mass forward all of their emails to their mailbox, which can work. It's not a huge problem. I don't like doing mass forwards. There's a lot of spam that comes in. If you're doing warming of any kind, you have to really be careful to exclude stuff. It's also just not good practice to be forwarding that much email across the board. So what I've started doing and working with some clients is building automations that actually log into the mailbox, read the replies, and create a sentiment, a priority, depending on how you want to word it, of whatever email is. So if it's a out of office email, it'll tag it as out of office. If it's warming, it'll tag it as warming. If it's somebody who's not interested, it can tag it as not interested. One of the unique features we've been doing is using a lot of AI to read this. And one of the cool things that it does is a lot of people will write back saying, you've contacted the wrong person, right? The wrong company, the wrong person, whatever it is. We don't always get it right in outreach. So what's nice is a lot of times when you've contacted the wrong person, they may actually give you the right person to contact. Or a lot of out of offices aren't just out of offices, but there's somebody's retired or this person's no longer at the job. Please reach out to this person instead. So we're reading all of these and we're able to capture that information pretty easily by tweaking AI and getting the prompts right and basically telling it, if it's this style of email and somebody says, George no longer works here, Josh has taken his job, we can grab that information, put it in a Google Sheet, CSV, our database, whatever you want, and feed that new person back into the system. The other nice thing is that if the person does show interest, if you have a dedicated sales team or you have a dedicated person who is responding to these, one of the things that I've liked to start doing is you create a looping in email. So if I built George's system for outreach and he's the main person who wants to reply to these, I can create based on the sentiment that somebody replies to us. If they say, yes, I'm interested, I want to know more, or, something along those lines, the AI will read it. It'll put sentiment on it. We have different levels of that also. And then we have another prompt afterwards that if it is a positive response, creates a reply, thank you for getting a hold of us. We're really interested in working with you. We're going to loop in George into this process because he knows more and he can help. And it'll auto create that email. It'll auto CC George in the email. That way he gets it with the entire chain, which is helpful, right? If I just tell George you got an email, it's very, very helpful to see what the potential client said, so you have an idea of how to respond. So it's a way to get around just mass forwarding. If you have multiple salespeople, you can set this up for, to round robin those people, or if you have contact owners, you can do it that way. But it's a pretty cool automation. And I use Slack for those that use it. For those that just have email, you can actually get a notification I get a notification for every email that comes in for every one of my clients. It allows me to double check that the prompts are working right, the sentiment's working right, the replies are working right. Just so I usually don't run it forever. I'll run it for like 30 days just to make sure I can go back and the prompt got this one wrong. But it's a really nice way to just reply to the lead right away. You could set a time on it. I usually wait 30 minutes. I make it during business hours because I feel like it's weird if George was to reply to one of my outreach emails at 1:00 in the morning and I send him an email 2 minutes later at 1:02 in the morning, it feels fake, right? It feels like a templated fake setup auto follow. And I don't really want it to feel that way. I want them to think a person is doing this. So you don't have to put the weights on it. If you want the person to get it right away, by all means, it's not a hard setup. I like to put that 30-minute wait, set business hours, and now every email that comes in is automatically looping in the right person that needs to get looped in. The person's getting replied to. What's nice is that mailbox, the outreach mailbox, is now also engaging. So it's getting a reply and it's replying back, which helps with your deliverability over long term because it's it's that second conversation. So that's one of the main automations we've been building. It's not that hard. I've seen people build it in Zapier. I've seen people build it in make.com and N8N. It's really not that hard of an automation. It takes a little bit of AI. Honestly, that's kind of the hard part is just tweaking the prompts to make sure it's understanding the sentiment correctly. But yeah, it's a fun little thing to build. It should take you a day or two to get it done. And now you don't really have to worry about checking those mailboxes or the master inbox that George and other teams just spend hours building for you and that you don't want to check. But it is a good way around it. That's fairly simple. It all comes to your inbox. You could even tag those yourself. So if you want to highlight them so you know where they are, pretty simple to do. And it's a nice little automation to build.
Yeah, I like that. I did it over forwarding all the replies to one. Not as great. Yeah, I was just saying that I think that CC concept is a lot better compared to just forwarding all replies to some email. Because I really like the idea of having some kind of real engagement in your email account. So now when the lead replies to you, then can reply back, and then you can also include those CC'd colleagues, and then also doing the round robin. So if someone has a sales team of maybe 5 salespeople, being able to evenly distribute replies by CCing them in an even distributed way automatically is a really cool concept.
Yeah, I like it. It helps the clients maintain the stuff. It's also, like I said, it's good for us consultants that are doing deliverability because it does add one more email in the chain. Forwarding an email doesn't help your deliverability at all. It doesn't technically hurt it, but if you start doing mass forwards, you are breaking your authentication. If you are tracking your DMARC, and it does become harder as a deliverability person to really know where your compliance sits and your authentication sits, because every time you forward an email, it breaks authentication. So if it's only happening a handful of times, it's no big deal. But if you're doing it a lot, it's hard for the consultant. If he's monitoring DMARC and authentication, it's hard to really know and make sure everything's good if you're doing it at scale. And when you're writing out of that same mailbox, you send an outreach email, somebody replies to it, and you reply back, that does help your deliverability a lot. It's creating a conversation that goes back and forth, and it's helping that mailbox over time maintain better deliverability.
Yeah.
Added bonus.
Yeah, in my opinion, no one really knows the exact answer to how some of this stuff works, but if you can just make things look natural when possible, it's just probably a good idea. So yeah, forwarding 1,000 emails a month is probably not a natural looking thing, whereas if you can at least reply to the lead directly and then CC someone, that's a little bit more natural in my opinion. So it's probably a safer thing long term. So I'm reading this thing here. It's basically someone talking about what makes a great cold email from a copy perspective. And yeah, I was sort of thinking about this topic for the last couple of weeks as well. And as time goes on, I try to make it more and more simple. Where now, when I'm writing a cold email, I usually just try to tell the prospect what it is that we do and why it's great or better than whatever they're currently doing, and then a really simple call to action, based, without a call to action that doesn't involve the time. And that's sort of how I've been writing my cold emails a lot recently. And I was just wondering if you have any ideas in terms of when you're writing a cold email, do you have any frameworks that you like to follow?
I think it's a lot the same you're talking about. I think in my world, cold email comes down to trying to make the potential lead, the contact, how do we make their life faster, easier, cheaper, simpler? You have to show them why, like you said, your platform, your product is better, right? Are you going to make their life easier? Do you have something that is a platform that tracks, tasks versus the one that they're using? And it's a faster system. It's a better system. It's easier to use. You have to show these people to get them to either change platforms or take the time to actually talk to you. You have to show them a benefit of some kind, a benefit better than what they have. So either a cheaper platform, you're paying $100 a month right now for the CRM you're using. We offer a CRM that's $49 a month, and it's as good, if not better, than what you have. Or our CRM is faster and cleaner, it's simpler to use, something along those lines. I'm trying to either show them the benefit of what we have, or the alternative, if I don't think they have a product like this, or I'm not trying to compete per se, then I'm trying to talk about what pain points they have, right? What do they go through their day that I can, again, it's about making easier, right? Oh, every single day you have to do your to-do list. How long does that take? How can I make that easier? So it's a lot of brainstorming. I put myself on the other side of things as if I'm the contact, and what would I want to read and what would I want to see. I do think short and sweet is the best. If you want to write more, send more emails. Don't put them all in one. I'm not saying send 20 emails because you have 20 different ideas, but rather than sending one email with, 500 words, maybe you send 3 emails with 100, 150 each. Try to make each email tackle one problem, one issue. That's it. If like George was saying, if he was trying to do outreach for Email Chaser, he listed everything that it could do in one email. People aren't going to read it. They're going to get confused. It's too much. Find the best of what your product does. Pick 2 or 3 of those and make every one of those one email. Maybe the first one won't hit the target, hit right with what they're looking for, but the second or third one might. And rather than putting them all in one, because this is the greatest platform ever and we do these 47 different things, you're going to lose the person. It's too much information. People don't want to read anymore. George and I talked about that a lot. Keep it simple, keep it short, and find the top 2 or 3 best things / benefits of your product and try to highlight those in a way that shows them why you're better than somebody else, or why you can improve that person's workflow, their time spent, their budget, something along those lines.
Yeah, I think people need to be honest with themselves when it comes to thinking about, what are you saying and why should the person care about what you're saying? Because if someone's already using a tool and you're offering the exact same tool with 0 differentiation, then there's really no reason for that person to want to reply to you or take you up on your offer. It doesn't make any sense. You have to come in at some kind of angle where there's a clear differentiation and benefit to using your product, and then give them an offer which is basically no risk. So I think that's what more people should spend time thinking about.
I would also say something that I've been doing lately, and I know that this may sound a little bit off, but I've actually been taking copies of the emails that I use and giving them to people to read that are not in that industry at all. Either family, friends of mine, other people that I know, colleagues that I know that are not in that industry, just to get a quick response. What is your first response to this email? What do you think of it? Do you understand it? And granted, if we're trying to sell a CRM and I show it to somebody who doesn't know what a CRM is, they are probably going to be confused, right? and not quite understand what I'm doing. But all of that feedback helps, right? Make sure that it makes sense, to everyone, and find the benefits that help. And like George said, sometimes you have to take the blinders off a little bit. Your product is great. What your product can do. But sometimes you got to take those blinders off and either ask for help or look at it from a different angle. And, maybe not everyone is going to agree that this great feature that you think is what sells your platform is really what sells it. There might be another feature that you're not even thinking about that is actually what that contact is looking for.
Yeah, exactly. And for anyone watching this who wants some inspiration or ideas, if you go to Email Chaser's blog, I recently updated one of our articles titled 7 Best Cold Email Templates. So if you find that article later, you'll be able to see that there's 7 different templates, all of which were used in real campaigns. So these have results backing them up. And you just scan through that article and you'll see some example of good performing cold emails and how you can maybe write your cold emails in a similar way to get more replies.
I think it's also just the last thing. I think it's also a time. We talk about less word count, but I also think you got to think about how much time are you taking out of this person's day, and the less time that you can take for them to get the email, open the email, read the email, reply to your email, the less time that takes, the much higher chance you have of actually getting a reply. If somebody has to read for 3 or 4 minutes to understand what's going on, it's never going to happen.
Or is going that? No.
If you can get in and get out, literally have them open, read, reply, send, done in 20 seconds,
that's it.
You have a really good chance of getting a reply.
Yeah, exactly. I actually received an email this morning from someone, and they said something which was, they weren't trying to sell anything to me, but they were asking a question, but it was such a basic question that I could reply in 10 seconds, and I just sent them that response. And so it proves your point that if it's something which someone can reply to very quickly with minimal effort, they're going to reply usually. Now, I'm looking at another post here from someone, and they're talking about reply rates. And this person says that they sent 100 cold emails and they only got 4 replies. And this person thinks that that's a problem. But I think for anyone who sends cold email at scale, a 4% reply rate is actually pretty good. So, do you have any thoughts? If you were talking to a beginner, for example, how would you try to explain to them, how cold email reply rates work and what would be a good reply rate, and then when you would want to scale? Do you have any things to share there?
So I'm assuming you're saying that this person just started cold email, that this was their first list of 100 and they got 4 replies.
Yeah, exactly.
I would probably be jumping up and down for joy and shaking their hand to be able to target quality contacts that fast, to be able to actually write content that gets opened and read and replied to in your first 100 emails is pretty amazing, to be honest. I know there's a lot of stuff on LinkedIn and YouTube, but people talk about 30%, 40% reply rates. I'm not doubting any of those people. Maybe I am a little bit, but if I can consistently get a 4% reply rate across all of my campaigns, especially when I first start, I would be ecstatic. Most of my clients would be ecstatic. I have a few that get above that, to be honest, 6, 7, 8%, but that's stuff that we've been tweaking the quality of the list, the content for a year. We started at 1.5% reply rate. And it took us a year to build up from 1.5% to 6, 7, 8%. And it's not just your content. It's your list. It's your are you inboxing? Do you have a good list? And do you have good content? And is that content resonating? So if you start with the 4% out of 100, just to be honest, your next 100, like George and I talked about before, 100 is not enough of a number to really know if something's working or not. I wouldn't even change anything. I would feed in another 100 and another 100 and another 100, the exact same thing you have. If you start tweaking it, your next 100 could go up or down and you don't really know. You could have just hit the perfect 100 contacts, and the next 100 you could get 0 or you can get 8. I would probably shoot for more like sending 500 or 1,000 with the same content, the same kind of strategy, And if you can then keep that 4% reply rate, now you start to just tweak your subject lines. You try to get more people to open them. You start to tweak your content. You start to tweak your CTAs. You're not going to jump from 4% to 20 overnight, right? You can slowly work on it. It takes time, week over week, making small changes, month over month, recording the data. You go from 4% to 4.5 to 5.2, back down to 4.9, back up to 6. And it takes time. Like I said, I tell most of my clients, my goal is to get to 1 to 1.5% reply rates within the first 2 months. If we beat that, fantastic. But I think that's pretty average, of what you can do at any kind of scale. And then you just improve from there. Nobody knows the perfect content. Nobody knows the perfect strategy. You have to constantly be looking at the data, constantly thinking about the content, constantly thinking about how do I get better contacts, and slowly tweaking that system until you get to the percentages that you want. I don't know what's possible in the industry that person's in, but like I said, if I built a system for a client and we sent 100 emails and I got 4 replies, I would be extremely happy.
Yeah, I mean, this whole topic just makes me think of 2 things, really. One is, what's the value of a customer or client? Because you get 4 replies in 100 emails, and each customer might be worth $5,000, $10,000 long term to your business. How is that a bad thing? And then the second thing is, sort of smells like a scarcity mindset. Does this person only have 100 people in the entire industry? I mean, I'm not quite sure why. So, what is stopping the person from then taking it to the next level and scaling? And if there are only 100 people or 1,000 people in the entire industry, well, then maybe you shouldn't even send cold emails. Maybe you should literally send them a physical item and really spend way more effort on each individual lead. But
yeah, I shoot for most of the clients that I work with. I had a conversation earlier with somebody. They were talking about they want to hit 100 to 150,000 contacts a month, and I could build that system. George can build that system. It's very possible. I don't like to build that system out of the box. I like to build a system that can hit 10 to 20,000 contacts a month, make sure everything is fine tuned, because the overhead cost of 100,000, 150,000 contacts a month, there's huge overhead costs. You have hygiene costs, you have mailbox costs. If you use warming or not, which George and I can discuss later, there's a lot of overhead cost into running those, right? You need more mailboxes, you need more domains, you need more hygiene, you need a lot more systems in place to send 150,000 a month versus 10,000. I think 10,000 to 20,000 is a great starting number per month. You could send everybody 2 or 3 emails, you feed 5,000, 6,000 people into the system, and you see if it works. Does your industry respond? Does your product actually sell? Are you getting the open rates, the click rates, the reply rates that you're looking for? Is this actually something that has a positive ROI that we can build and work on? And if it does, it's a lot easier to go from a pre-built system that sends 10,000 emails a month and scale that than just starting from scratch at 150,000. It's a lot. Like I said, first of all, if you told me that you have 150,000 contacts to send to and they're highly targeted, I'm going to question you on day one. That you actually have 150,000 highly targeted contacts. I'm not saying it can't happen, right? But that's my first question. Let's go find, like we talked about before, a very, very, very specific profile. Let's target that profile, 1 or 2 of them, and hit those people with personalized emails. See if your product can sell, over cold outreach. Does it work? Does it make sense? And when we can turn an ROI that we're happy with, then you tweak it. Before you even scale, you tweak that to turn a higher ROI. By day 60, if we're getting 2x, by day 120, I want a 4x. You tweak it as much as you can to dial in everything while your overhead costs are low, while you're maintaining a system that's smaller and simpler to maintain, and you dial in as much as you can, and then you start to scale it. If you say, hey, I'm getting one sold client out of every 100, if I feed in 1,000, I'll get 10. Well, in the email world, 2 plus 2 does not equal 4. Sorry to say. it equals 3. It is not an exponential thing because you run out of targets to email that are quality. You can't just say, oh, I'll go find another 100,000 people that are quality. You're going to run out at some point, depending on your industry. There's only so many people out there that are interested in what it is that you're trying to sell. So I usually advise starting smaller, but again, to me, small is 10 to 20,000 a month. Some people might say 100,000 is small. I'd rather start there. Less overhead, less build, less maintenance, easier to control. You're still sending enough that you get real analytics, real stats to know if it works. If you just send 100, you're not going to know. You're really not. I mean, it's awesome that you got four replies. That's really cool. But again, you could send the next 1,000 and get 1, or you can get 50. It's so hard to say at just 100. It's just not enough to know. I want to send enough to know if it's working. Is there an ROI? Is there positive revenue? Then go from there.
Yeah, and also, let's say you're going to send 10,000 emails to start. It's not like you just send 10,000 email, you launch the campaign, you come back a week later or 2 weeks later. Like, you launch the campaign and then you sort of check in maybe on a daily basis to make sure that the bounce rate is consistently low, that you do have a decent reply rate. So you're sort of monitoring it as it's starting to also make sure that things are going in the right direction. So, I think this is just one of the issues that people have in cold email, especially beginners. They want this system where they just click a button and they don't have to think about anything, and then they just come back a few weeks later and they magically have thousands of new customers. But that's just not how any customer acquisition method works. You obviously have to keep monitoring these things and tweaking them and improving them as time goes on. It's just obvious.
Your first 30 to 60 days are the most important 30 to 60 days of the project. One, you have to ramp up correctly. You can't just turn on a mailbox and send 40 a day. You got to start small. Some people are safer than others. I usually start around 5 to 8 a day. Some people like to start a little smaller than that. But I'm not going to go from 5 a day to 40 a day overnight also, right? I'm going to go from 5 a day to 10 a day to 15 a day to 25 a day. Maybe from 20, you can make a little bit larger jumps as you start to get up. But I like to, if I start at 5 a day, I'm going to leave it like that for 3 days and let it run. And then after 3 days, I'm going to go from 5 to 8 a day and let that run. Then from 8, I'm going to go to 15 a day and let that run for 3 or 4 days. So the process to get from 0 to 30 or 40 a day could take you 2 weeks, 4 weeks, somewhere in there. And that's where you're monitoring everything. Like George said, you want to make sure you're not getting a bounce rate that's over, preferably nothing over 2%. Is the best. The lower, the better. But you're also monitoring how everything is going. Are you getting replies? Are the emails going out as they should? Are the sequences written correctly? Is everything just working? Right? Is the system itself just working and you're monitoring it? You could run some inbox tests as you're doing it, making sure stuff is going on. And then once you're ramped up to full, that first month is going to tell you, can I maintain these numbers? Right? If I'm sending 30 a day per mailbox, and that's where I get to after the first month, I'm leaving it at 30 and I'm checking in all of the time. And if you're tracking open rates, are they dropping? If you're getting reply rates, are they dropping? If you're running inbox tests, are they starting to show more spam? Because if you build to 30 and all of a sudden your list and your content can't handle it and you're not getting engagement and you're getting spam clicks, you're going to go into the spam folder really fast. So it's just one of those things where I always thought the first 60 days from when we click start is the most important 60 days. I usually don't even concern myself with subject lines and content until I'm past that 60-day mark to make sure the system can actually maintain itself. Now, if there's a subject line or content that I think is just running horribly, if I'm doing an A/B test and one of them has a 4% reply rate, the other one has a 0.2% reply rate, I'll make a change. But it's fairly similar, 3.2 to 3.6. I'm more concerned about, I want to build a system that will sustain and run over a long period of time. And then after those 60 days, I start zeroing in on the subject lines, the content, the CTAs, everything else to tweak it and improve it. But it does take time. Cold outreach is, like George said, it's not a flip a switch, turn it on and wait a week and all of a sudden your calendar is going to be full. It just doesn't work that way. It's a lot of energy. It's a lot of maintenance. It's a lot of tweaking, over time that takes hours and takes testing, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. We're actually going to update our gradual build up feature soon, because what you just said reminded me, so that we're going to update our feature very soon so that users are going to be able to control how many days are in that build up period. So I just want to mention that to you because I know we spoke about that previously. So that's going to be coming in the not too distant future. And then also on this topic of monitoring campaigns that you've just launched to make sure they're going in the right direction, we're also going to build a feature very soon where if you'll have the ability to basically automatically disconnect email accounts, which bounce 2 times in a row. So if you launch a campaign and the sender email account or sender email accounts in your campaign receive 2 bounces in a row, it'll just automatically disconnect. And the reason why that's important is because sometimes you launch campaigns and you're not paying attention, and maybe your email account is blacklisted or some kind of problem, and then it'll just start bouncing over and over again, even if your lead list has been verified, because the bounces are not hard bounces. They're bounces from the actual sending of from your email accounts. So being able to quickly disconnect them as soon as possible before there's too much damage done is really important.
Yeah, and there's even, it's even a great idea because, Microsoft Office, when they restrict a mailbox, they will actually sometimes let it keep sending. It just bounces everything. So you could literally, and I've seen it happen because last year Office changed a bunch of their rules. And if you were connected to certain sending platforms or warming platforms, they were calling it an anomalous sending pattern. And they were restricting the mailbox, but the platform itself kept trying to send, but the mailbox just kept bouncing everything. So you would literally bounce every single email that you sent. And if you're not paying attention to your campaign and you only check in once a week, you could have hundreds of bounced emails, which is just killing your deliverability. No one's checking it minute by minute, of course, but that is a great feature that help you protect against things like that.
Yeah, and the problem that I've seen a lot of people have with this idea of automatically disconnecting email accounts when they have a lot of bounces is that I think they're viewing it in the wrong way. So they typically will say something like, okay, if my email account has a bounce rate above 3%, then automatically disconnect it. But the problem with that approach is that you then have to ask the question, okay, how do you calculate the bounce rate? Out of how many emails? Like, are you going to let your email account send 100 emails and then calculate the 3%? At which point it may have bounced 50 times. It's like you sort of have to, you want to stop the issue as soon as it starts happening. You don't want to wait for 100 more emails to send. So I think that's why our feature is going to be pretty cool, because it's really going to cut it off as soon as possible. And I think that's going to be different to a lot of other systems that people currently use, where they might be waiting too long, and then by that time it's maybe too late.
Yeah, I think it's great. There's a lot of times where I get lists. I have a client, but that client has an entire sales team of 10 different people, and every one of those people is sending me a different list to feed into the system, and they're the contact owner we put in the campaign, and they swear up and down that they sent it through a hygiene program and that they've already cleaned it and they're all deliverable. I'm going to be honest, I don't really believe most people, but I try to. And it just happened to me a couple of weeks ago where there's a team of 6 salespeople that I work with from one company, and one guy gave me a list that was not run through hygiene. And when those contacts came up, because the platform they were pulled from, you're looking at a 25 to 30% potential bounce rate. All of a sudden, we were running less than 1% bounce rate. And all of a sudden, I looked at it 2 days later, and we bounced 8% of our emails in a 3-day period. Just because of one list that got in that wasn't hygiene. There's a lot of different reasons why emails can bounce. It's not going to destroy your system if you catch it right away, which is what they're trying to solve, which is why I love it. If one mailbox goes down, you're not shutting down your whole system, right? Shutting down one mailbox, maybe 2. And if I'm sure, hopefully there's an alert system to let you know that it went down. You can figure out what happened. Was it a bad list? Did Microsoft shut me down for some reason? What is it that caused these bounces? Did I just happen to hit 2 in a row, which happens, right? It's, freak of nature can happen where you bounce 2 in a row, and then you could probably just turn the mailbox back on. But I'd rather check it and know than have it just keep bouncing emails across the board and ruin the entire infrastructure and have problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, I've already touched on this, but I'll say it one more time for anyone who's watching who's new to cold email. Just because, a bounce doesn't mean that the lead is invalid. Often, if your email accounts have issues, then Gmail and Outlook will basically restrict the sending from those email accounts. So just because you have a high bounce rate doesn't mean that your lead list is full of invalid emails, although that could be the reason. But I guess what our point here is sort of whether it's your lead list or whether it's your email accounts, it doesn't really matter. The point is that you just really want to make sure that you catch this as soon as possible, and then then you can analyze what's going on. And if you then stop sending from your email accounts, you put them on hold for a couple of weeks. Sometimes you can bring them back and they'll be fine. Just because you have certain issues, that issue might be temporary. It doesn't necessarily mean that your email account's completely toast, but it's not the end of the world. You just have to cool it down for a little bit and bring it back in, and maybe it's still fine. But we've been talking for a while, Josh. I know we both have a lot of stuff to do today, so I reckon we should wrap this up here. For anyone watching who wants to potentially hire you or your agency to run their lead gen for them, what would be the best place for them to contact you and find you?
You can check us out at 3redboxes.com. It's our website. It has all the information on what we do. There's a form that you can fill out to get a hold of. It goes directly to me. If you want to just talk about, you have questions about outreach and you want to just talk for 15 or 20 minutes, or you have questions about how do I build a system, or wanting me to help you build a system, whatever it is, feel free to put it in that form, contact me. We can talk, set up a time to chat and go from there. I look forward to helping more and more people in outreach. Not all of them are my clients. Some people just contact me for 15, 20 minutes to ask certain questions like George and I go over sometimes. I have no problem taking those meetings, helping you out here and there, and hopefully helping your system grow.
I'm going to add your LinkedIn profile to the description of this YouTube video. So for anyone watching, you'll be able to find his LinkedIn profile there as well. And thanks for joining me this week. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
Thanks, George.